I just want to say thanks, first off, for diving into a real messy world. Because how many of you have already had to deal with it, just even on a personal level? People you know, maybe even your own self at some point. Yeah. So this is one of these things that is very prevalent, but how many of you also know people don't like to talk about it? Okay, and what makes it even worse is there's an urban myth out there that says that if you do talk about it, people are more likely to do it. Okay, and I have had school administrators say those very things to me. Well, no, we're not going to talk about it because then they're more likely to do it. But how many of you know if you don't talk about it, it's a guarantee that they're going to do it? And that's the bigger reality. And even worse, I think, to some degree in the church, we don't think we have this problem. Okay, I came back from one of my overseas jaunts years ago, and I got home, and I really just felt burdened again for being here in my own country. And so I sent to every AG church that was on my mailing list, and I said, hey, we'll send all our stuff to you free. Just let me know if you want it. And out of the, I think there was 240 churches on the list, something like that. It was over 200.
About 300.
Yeah, it could have been 300. Guess how many of the churches wanted the free materials? One. And they said, hey, we don't have this problem, but we like free resources. And you guys are sitting there going, you're kidding me. But unfortunately, that's been the church context for way too long. So that's why I applaud you guys for diving into this. Now, I have been the direct intervention guy in my first 10 years on staff at a church for 40 suicide attempts, where I had to call 911, kick down doors, hold buckets while the kids are puking. I had the phone numbers to our psych ward memorized. I was dealing with these kind of kids all the time. And then since that time, we've created a suicide prevention program that we do in the public schools. And so I am constantly, as a matter of fact, Monday and Tuesday of this next week, I'll be in one of my local middle schools. The last week in the month, I'll be in one of my local high schools, and I'll speak 18 times there. I talk to every student that goes through that high school in their health department, and it's a required class for the kids. So they have gone from suicide high, because they'd kind of picked that nickname up locally. And how many of you know you earned that nickname? You know, because they'd had so many suicides. So that has been kind of reversed. And then one of the fun things about doing it this way, in a proactive way, is if you talk to somebody before they actually hit the problem, they know what to do when they do hit that problem. And that's why when I look at it, especially in the youth group setting, be proactive on this. Don't wait for something to happen in your community. Do it when everybody's happy and smiling. Okay? And do it in a kind of a calculated approach way. I've talked to a lot of youth groups where the youth pastors are concerned. They're saying, hey, I'm concerned about a lot of my kids. So they bring me in to talk about this, and so I get up there and I don't do this. Hey, I'm sure glad to be here tonight because your youth pastor says you're all screwed up, and I'm here to fix you. Ta-da! How many of you know that doesn't work? No, you kind of have to do what they do, because you know, for them, when they've got a problem, they say, well, you know, I've got a friend. How many of you know where this conversation is going? I got a friend, and my friend was wondering, and my friend, and eventually they forget and they say I. Because it's them. But you kind of do the same thing. You say, you know what? How many of you have got friends and you're concerned about your friends sometimes, maybe in the area of being suicidal? Well, the hands go up. I said, great. Well, today we're going to equip you to help your friends. And I know full well I'm talking to them. Okay, so you kind of have to do that just so they don't put up their walls. So what we're going to do is, this is like the finished product. This is the blank side that we always start with. Because one of the things that's a basic reality, how many of you know if you just listen to something, you only hear a certain percentage of it? But if you're actually writing things down and you get a visual for it, then you end up with a lot better retention. So what we do, and what I do in the public schools and churches and everything, is I draw this. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through this so that you know what it stands for and what it means. And then that way, when the time comes, you can draw this wherever you need to. Because not only have I done this in churches and schools, I've drawn this on the side of my truck, in a Lowe's parking lot, on a barf bag, on an airplane, at a napkin at a birthday party, on a scrap of paper in a park. I have drawn this thing for so many people in so many different settings, I can't even tell you where they all were. Because that hurt world that we live in, they need Jesus. And you got to start somewhere, okay? So we're going to walk through this. Feel free to ask questions at any point in time. If something doesn't make sense, go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Because if you're brave enough to raise your hand and ask the question, how many of you know you'll be somebody else's hero? Because they were thinking the same thing, they just didn't want to go down that road. So, start up in this top corner. And we'll explain to you what you've got in that little box. So, this is a carnivorous Pac-Man. How many of you have ever played a game where there was a Pac-Man? Remember how you got chased across the screen and it was kind of terrifying? Okay, well, he represents the fears people have. Public school version. We know who that really is, don't we? We have an enemy who comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Okay, so in the church setting, he's got a name. Public schools, Pac-Man. Okay, this is any human being, and we all face challenges and obstacles all our life. Okay, if you think it gets easier the older you get, ha ha on you. Okay, no, it doesn't get easier. It gets more complicated. The older you get, the more complicated it gets. Okay, so always have obstacles and challenges. Most obstacles or challenges take a certain amount of tries to get past. So we put the number 10 up here just to give you a reference point. But the average kid, before they learn how to walk, guess how many times the average kid falls down before they learn how to walk? 300. But we forget that. And the older we get, we think it's going to be easy. And how many of you know when you're a teenager, you are constantly placed in situations where you're an idiot? You don't know what to do, you're overwhelmed, but you have to do something. How many of you know that's almost the definition of being a teenager? Everything you do is new. You've never done this before. So the chances of you overcoming it quickly are like zero. And yet kids get told, dream your dream. If you find your passion, you'll never have to work a day in your life, and yada, yada, yada. How many of you know none of that's true? Yeah, the reality is you face challenges and obstacles all the time, even in the things you love to do. Okay? So, and let's say you don't get past that challenge. Okay, so always a new obstacle, always a new challenge. The carnivorous Pac-Man has started to grow. When you were overcoming your challenges, soccer ball size, kick them out of the way, hey, no big deal, life's cruising. Okay? But let's just say you don't get past that one, now there's the new one. Maybe a little bit less motivated now. So instead of 10 tries, maybe you only got 6 tries in you. Okay? Carnivorous Pac-Man, a little bit bigger, a little bit harder to ignore, a little bit harder to say, hey, no big deal. Let's say you don't get past that one. Okay, now you're over here. Carnivorous Pac-Man keeps getting bigger. Really hard to ignore. Really hard to say, hey, no big deal. Okay, find out how many of your students have problems sleeping at night. I'll bet you it's almost 100%. Almost 100%. And this is one of the reasons why. They're afraid of something. Something's nagging at them, some past failure, some future challenge. They're just being buried. And the challenge with not enough sleep, guess what the number one cause of depression is for a teenager? Not enough sleep. As simple as that. Now, why they can't sleep, that gets complicated. But the number one challenge as a teenager as far as being able to not be depressed is just getting enough sleep. How many of you know as an adult, that's not a whole lot different sometimes? Yeah, but the challenge as a teenager is even greater. So let's just say you don't get past this obstacle. Okay, now you're starting to get in danger zone here. And here's where it gets really tough. You still look the same up here. Because how many of you know a lot of suicides happen on weekends? Okay, I don't know statistically what the numbers are, but a lot of them do. So you'll see somebody on Friday at school, at work, whatever, and then they're not at school or at work on Monday. And people go, hey, what happened to so-and-so? And they go, oh, you didn't hear? No, what happened? Oh, they took their life this weekend. And you're like, what? Because you saw them like this on Friday. Okay, but then this happened over the weekend. Because here's the deal about being here. Even though you look the same, you're not the same. You're weak on the inside. You're falling apart. Life is just not working for you. So boom, now you roll to your next obstacle or challenge. You only got 2 tries left in you. And how many of you know there's hardly anything you're going to figure out with just 2 tries? Not much at all. Okay, and so now you start to look a little different. Carnivorous Pac-Man is huge. And then you roll over, you don't get past that one. Boom, now you're here. You got 1 try left in you. The carnivorous Pac-Man, the word rock in a hard place is like a minor way of looking at it. You're in huge trouble. And if you don't get some help here, boom, there's no 6th frame. Okay, so I'll give you an example of one of the gals we worked with and what it looked like for her. Okay, so boom, she is just started coming to our youth group because she had a boyfriend. How many of you have the good old dating challenges going on in your youth group, right? And in a general sense, teenagers today, they don't date. They're not in relationships. They're married minus the ring. And depending on what their personal boundaries are, they're doing everything that married couples do. Okay? So they're dating. So she has met this guy. She thinks he's incredible. She's a top 10 student, straight A's. If you just looked at her on the outside, you're just thinking, man, write a book on what this kid's going to do and where she's going to go. Until November when he broke up with her. Flush. Okay, so she kind of spirals out. She can't get him back, and she tried an awful lot of different things. And the deal about getting depressed and bummed, you tend to miss school. What happens to your grades when you start missing school? Yeah, they only go down. Is it very easy to get them back up again? Especially if they're straight A's? No, you can't get them back up. So she went from boyfriend's gone, obstacle number one. Number two is now her grades have slipped. And how many of you know the word top 10 doesn't mean pretty good grades? It means ridiculous grades. So boom, she's not in the top 10 club anymore. And that was her group of friends. So she missed a little bit more school because of that. And then in our school district, if you miss a certain amount of days of school, you don't get credit for the whole semester. So now she's down here. She's lost the boyfriend. She's lost her group of friends. She's lost, her status, so to speak. Hey, I'm a grade kid. And now she's not even going to graduate with everybody because she lost the whole semester. Straight A kid. And she's not going to graduate with her friends. So then any little thing that would come along, and she'd make an attempt. She made about 6 pretty serious attempts before she finally started to level out. One day I saw her in the foyer. I just come around the corner, saw her in the foyer, and I go, something's not right. She goes, well, it's too late. I already took the pills. And so I usher her into the office, and about that time she starts puking. So I'm holding the bucket while she's puking like crazy. Got 911 on the line. Boom, they're on their way. Fortunately, before church let out, we were able to, they rolled the gurney in. She's passed out by this point. We get her on the gurney, and they take her to St. Pete's, and they were able to, bring her back. But that was that kid. And the challenge with this is, and this is unfortunately a characteristic of Americans in general, how many of you know when we need help, we don't ask for it? Yeah, we go down that road of, well, I'm going to tough it out, I'm going to figure it out, and all that kind of stuff. So she wouldn't accept help for an awful long time. And that wasn't her only serious attempt. That was just one of many. Okay, but when she finally got to that point of letting us kind of help her in her world, here's the thing I've learned, and I can say this wholeheartedly. There isn't an obstacle or challenge out there that doesn't have an answer. Period. You can throw anything you want at me. I'll go, no, there's an answer to that. But how many of you know when you're 15, you don't know those answers? And if you only talk to your friends, guess what? They don't know those answers. And can you get good answers on Google or Wikipedia? Not always, okay? So for her, we started to work with her, and the first thing we did was we said, okay, we can get you a high school diploma. And she's like, oh, what do you mean? I said, well, you can get a GED. She goes, oh, that's only for stupid people. It's like, no, that's for people where it didn't work the first time. So she finally got her GED, and then she started going to a community college, and initially she was terrified. She goes, well, what are the people going to say? They're going to ask me what my GPA was in high school, and I'm going to have to say I got a GED. And I said, no, they don't care. Just go. So she went. She did fine. So, GED, goes to community college, gets her grades back up, starts feeling good about herself, finishes her 2-year, goes to a 4-year, graduates, meets a guy, gets married. Boom. Now, that didn't happen overnight. How many of you love quick fixes? They don't exist in youth ministry, okay? They're just not there. But the beauty of it is by watching her walk through all her issues, because we had to deal with all of them. We couldn't just go, we're going to pray for you and it's all going to be good. Memorize John 3:16 and you'll be fine. No, you got to walk through them on all this stuff. So she walked all the way through there. So what were her issues? You go ahead and help me identify. What were her issues? What got her to the point of trying to take her own life? What were her issues? Go ahead and give me at least some of her issues.
Sense of failure.
Yeah, failure, sense of failure. And how many of you know in America, we don't tolerate that? Yeah, we're horrible at that, okay? What would have been one of her other issues?
Rejection.
Okay, yeah, rejection. Okay, in several ways, because it was the guy, to a degree, she felt like the school let her down. What do you mean I can't graduate? Okay, what might be another one? Yep, self-doubt. Okay? Because how many of you know that little phrase, we don't care what you did for us yesterday, we only care what you can do for us today? That's horrible thinking. Okay? You gotta be able to look back at the milestones of the past to see where God's going to take you in the future. Okay? So yeah, anything else you could see for her?
Potential like loneliness.
Yeah, loneliness. Yeah, because I mean, again, marriage minus the ring, and all of a sudden the guy's gone. Because how many of you know dating couples, they are married minus the ring, they spend all their time together, whether it's physically or virtually, okay? You know, they're spending all their time together. So for them, when all of a sudden you pull all that away, that's a giant hole. Yeah, that's a giant hole. Okay, anything else for her?
Identity.
Okay, identity. Because yeah, I'm a straight A student. I'm the A kid. Okay, anything else you guys can see for her? Okay, now think of people you know or people your age that are high school age now. So the second sheet that's on your page, this is what the last group of students I spoke to in the fall semester told me. Because one of the things I do is after I do that in the public schools with this particular gal as an example, I say, okay, what about people you know or people your age? So these are the things that they said to me. So I wrote these down. This is what kids are thinking. So number one was loneliness. These don't create relationships that are real. These create fragile relationships that are totally dependent on that other student approving of them that moment, getting back to them within seconds, because they honestly don't think if they have to wait a minute for somebody to respond to them, they think something's wrong. They tell me that. That's what they tell me. No, yeah, if they don't get back to me in 15 seconds, something's wrong. Wow. I mean, that's impossible to keep that up. So what that means is every relationship is fragile. So yeah, number one on here is loneliness. Okay, next one of the big ones is expectations. Anybody here know what a tiger mom is? Okay, I heard a noise. Okay, what's a tiger mom? Madre de tigre. Tiger mom. Are you a tiger mom? That's you? Okay, she's a tiger mom. Okay, well.
I'm learning this as I've been a part of a leader.
Okay.
For like 4 months I'm learning this.
Okay. Yeah. Tiger moms push their kids incredibly hard. Not only do they have to have good grades, they've got to be a good athlete, they got to play the piano. Well, I mean, they got to, because you'll work at McDonald's your whole life if you can't do all these. That's one of their sting lines, you know. Like somehow that's bad. How many of you are glad somebody does work at McDonald's so you can eat something, right? But they make it all sound like, well, if you can't be a doctor or a lawyer, you're a loser. And so this expectation things. Kids are dying with the expectations their parents are putting on them, the expectations they put on themselves, the expectations that the schools put on them. How many of you know that on the Seahawk team, most of us could name at least one person? Yeah. Could we all name everybody on the team? Absolutely not. And how many of you know most of us will be people that nobody will know our names? And at some point, you got to be good with that. You got to be completely content in your own skin that you're doing what you should be doing, even if nobody ever knows what I do. Okay, and yet, does our world focus us that way? Oh no, you got to be a quarterback. You got to be Russell Wilson. You know, you got to be. So this whole expectation things is off the charts. Now, we can roll into that in the church world sometimes too. How many of you know sometimes we make every kid sound like they got to be the second Messiah? You know, and that's not true. There's all kinds of people in the house that make a house work. And some of them you don't know who they are. But help people find their good works in Christ, which they were created for in advance to do. That doesn't necessarily mean they're all up front. Okay, my wife is sitting right over there. She will never write a book. The only time she speaks up in front is if I'm up there with her, because it just makes her crazy, okay? But if she didn't do what I do, she does, I couldn't do what I do. Okay, she manages 3 websites, edits all my stuff, and by the way, they need to be edited. Okay, she does graphics for everything. She does the accounting. We've had teams on our mission trips where one team is $250,000 budget. She manages all that. She does incredible things, but she'll never be up front. And she learned to be good with that. Okay, and so when we're working with our students, that whole expectation things, if we can guide them into what the Lord has for them, it may turn the world upside down. But it still doesn't mean they're going to necessarily know who you are. Okay, you guys don't know who I am, but I've shared Christ with over 1 million people. I'm not famous. I'm just a steady Eddie. I just do what I do all the time. Just keep plugging away and just keep doing what we do, right? So expectations are killing them. And if you look at this list, every one of them, these were things that students told me would be things that got them to the point of taking their own lives. So these aren't all big deals, at least not in our eyes, but they're big deals for them. Huge deals. Okay? And in the earlier session I did today, I talk about when you're wounded. When you're wounded, you can look good on the outside, but on the inside, you're bleeding out. So some of these issues, even though they may not be the main issues, they're contributors, and they could be like literally the straw that breaks the camel's back. Okay? So boom, so we'll walk through all that, and then as you start to eliminate these issues, then you can start to see kids move forward. Now, there's a ton of people that are living right here. Ton of them. And I ask students all the time, how many of you ever feel bad, but you don't even know why you feel bad? Boom, every hand goes up. And so then I'll start helping them identify their issues. And if you can help them identify their issues, how many of you know then you can deal with their issues? I remember doing a winter camp one time, and 12 kids responded to the altar call. I talked to kid number 1, hey, what's going on? They tell me, and I go, oh, well, did you know? I gave them a scripture. And they go, oh, wow, thanks. They left. Next kid, hey, what's going on? Gave them a scripture. They left. I didn't pray for a kid to kid number 12. Because the first 11 didn't need prayer, they just needed truth. How many of you know when you don't have a guidance sign somewhere on the road, it's a horrible feeling to be lost. Horrible. How many of you how many of you live on the coast side where it rains too much? Okay, so how many of you know, especially at night, in the middle of December when you haven't seen daylight for who knows how long, and it's raining and you're trying to find somebody's house? How many of you have just driven around trying to find something that will tell me where I am? And your little GPS is going, ha, 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 I don't have that address, right? I mean, it just makes you nuts. Well, that's where a lot of these kids are at. So if you can help them identify these issues, they feel bad, they don't know why. Well, help them figure out what's going on. And then let's walk through all that stuff. That's part of discipleship, to learn how to deal with all the different issues and areas of life. So you walk through all that with them, and there's some clarity that comes to it. They understand why suicide happens and how you can talk about it. Okay, so your name is? Yeah, sorry. Cassia? Cool. Is that a K or a C or a? It's a K. K, okay. Cassia. Okay, so let's say Cassia's my neighbor. And when our kids were little, she used to come over and babysit. So we know her pretty good. So one day I see her headed out to school. I look over the fence. I go, hey, Cassia, you look really tired. She goes, yeah, big project last night. Forgot about it. Didn't get any sleep. Okay. Next day, she's rolling off to school. Hey, Cassia, you look hungry. Yeah, I slept in late. Didn't have time for breakfast. Okay, no big deal. Next day, she's headed off to school. Hey, Cassia, you look suicidal. Yeah, you're laughing. We can't talk about it, can we? As a culture, we can't talk about it. Now you can talk about it. So I'm not going to say to her, hey, are you suicidal? You think it's funny, don't you? Ha ha ha. Nervous laughter. Okay, so here we go. So I say, well, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, hey, Cassia, why don't you come over to the house after school today? My wife's got some projects if you want to make some money this weekend. And she's like, oh, okay, whatever. So she comes over, and my wife talks to her about the projects or whatever. And then my wife draws this for her and says, where are you at on this? She goes, wow, I'm probably right here. And then my wife says, well, what's going on? She says, well, I've got this one class that's killing me. And right now, if I bring them another bad grade, my parents are kind of fighting a lot. And they're going to get really mad at me, and maybe they'll get a divorce because of that, and I'm going to have to go live with my grandparents. And so my wife says, well, what's the class? She says, oh, it's a writing class. She says, I can't spell, I'm great at math, but I'm horrible at this. And my wife goes, well, you know what, I'm actually pretty good at that. Why don't you bring your homework over? And what did we just do? We started solving the problem. So we didn't take care of the homework, and then my wife says, well, you know, my husband and your dad get along pretty good. They fixed that fence last year after the storm came through. I'll bet you he could talk to your husband about anger and stuff, because that's one of the things I do in the public schools. And I go, maybe it could help him figure out how to deal with your mom. She goes, oh, that'd be awesome. And then she didn't have to think about living at her grandparents' house. See how practical that is? But you got to have a starting point. And that's the challenge with students. They have so much going on in their world that they don't necessarily have the clarity to do that. Okay? So hopefully, again, that just kind of explains, gives you a tool. Now, go ahead and pop down here. Okay, I know some of you are over 25, some of you aren't. What magical thing happened when you turned 25?
Insurance.
Yeah, car insurance dropped. Okay, how many of you aren't there yet? Okay, so you still pay astronomically high car insurance, don't you? Yeah, even as a good driver, you still pay a whole lot more. Well, here's what they learned decades ago, is that when you turned 25, statistically, you became a better driver. They didn't know why, they just knew it was true, so they went with the numbers, right? Well, now they know why. Guess when you're finally fully mentally and emotionally developed? 25. Unfortunately, as a culture, we keep pushing an age down farther and farther all the time. Okay, when I was in high school, you weren't considered an adult and you couldn't vote until you were 21. Throughout all of American history, all the way back to the Revolutionary War, 21 was always the adult age. How old was Jesus when he started to minister? 30. That was the adult age in the Jewish culture. How old do we make kids be adult decision makers now? 13. Yeah, way too early. So we're telling kids that when they're 14, well, you know, in 2 years you're going to be on your own. You're going to be driving a car, and I won't be there to help you make decisions. So you got to learn how to make adult decisions now. Bad advice. Because here's the deal: they don't even know if they make a good decision. They can't connect the dots that what I did on Monday determines what Friday looks like. And yet aren't we doing that as a culture, as parents, sometimes even as youth leaders? Got to make adult decisions. No, the best way to learn how to make good decisions is to watch somebody else make them. Be in on the process, but not be the one who has to make it. That's the best way to learn how to make good decisions. So what has happened is that we got all these kids here because when you initiate life, you make every decision based on emotions. Anybody still babysit or have little kids running around? Okay, everything they do is emotional, isn't it? They get emotional about food, bedtime, TV, toys. I mean, they're just an emotional package with two legs. And how many of you know that emotions are not accurate? Okay, how many of you have ever said this, remember back to your teen years? If I don't get something to eat tonight before I go to bed, I'm going to die. Yeah, are you really going to die? No. You can go weeks without food, but your tummy doesn't tell you that, okay? Or how many of you have ever been trying to go to sleep at night and all of a sudden you hear just outside your door and you've turned it into the psychotic killer that's just outside there waiting to jump in your house and kill you, right? Those are emotions. They're not accurate, okay? And yet you don't cross the line to where you base your life on experience until you're 25. So here we've got these emotion-driven, inaccurately information teenagers trying to make good decisions. Is that even statistically possible? Not highly. And yet we're dumping it on them. So they're living on this side of the line. You know, they're under 25. If you got a 14-year-old kid and they have an issue, who do they talk to?
Their friends.
Their friends. Who out of the best intentions of their hearts give them advice based on emotions. They don't get good advice from their friends. And every teenager will tell you, if you say, hey, how many of you have ever gotten really bad advice from a really good friend? Boop. All the time. And yet that's who they talk to. Unless they know they need to talk to people over here. And why? And that's what this does. Because every student recognizes, hey, I've got friends that are great friends, but hey, they give me bad advice all the time. And it's not like they're trying to torpedo my life. It's just they're teenagers like me. You know, they haven't lived enough life to get good advice yet. So on this side of the line, you get better advice. Now, for me, there's a real personal illustration. When I got out of college, I was 22. I took an extra year to get out. I had some sports eligibility. Most of my friends were 21. They graduated. And I remember one night I get the call that one of my college roommates had committed suicide. So then I kind of get the backstory on it. And what had happened was he had called one of my other buddies, both 21, said, hey, here's what's going on. I got the job and all that kind of stuff. It isn't working out the way I thought. It isn't what I thought it was going to be. I'm really bummed out. I don't know what to do. And my other buddy is just like, well, dude, I don't know what to do. Just do whatever you got to do. So the guy took his life that night. So I lost one of my college roommates right out of college. And the sad part is, if he'd talked to somebody over here, he would have got better advice. A lot better advice. okay? But he didn't. And so he's not here, hasn't been for a long time. And how many of you know not only is he gone, but how many of you know the guy that gave bad advice has been messed up too? Yeah, he's been messed up ever since. He's never flown straight. Okay? So that's that reality, is that whole idea of teaching people to reach out for help, teaching people who to reach out to help for. That's part of the big picture that we just have to do. You know, and sometimes teenagers will kind of put up their shackles like, well, you don't understand and you don't get it. And unfortunately, there's times that's true. Okay, don't remember being a teenager and then try to apply it to them. It is a different world. Okay, if you're over 30, you didn't have these growing up. Okay, you didn't. And they have changed things so much. Remember, the first cell phone we got was called a bag phone. It cost $2 a minute to use it. And it was so big, you'd plug it into your car, and it was as big as a small briefcase. You know, $2 a minute. I mean, $2 a minute, none of us would make phone calls. Okay, but I mean, that was the real world. Everything's free now. It's all in the plan. You know, you can text, you can call, you can FaceTime, you can do everything you want to do. So again, it is a different world. But if we recognize that, understand it, they'll listen. Okay? Now, here's some of the very obvious warning signs. And this is not like a complete list, because there is no such thing as a complete list. But these are the super common ones, and they're the ones that usually people miss. So this first one's called cleaning house. And what that just means is this. When you get old, you write a will. So it's all on paper. Hey, when I die, here's what happens to all our stuff. Okay? Kind of basic. When you're still alive, you just start giving your stuff away. Now, is it normal for a teenage kid to give all their cool stuff away? No. But what happens to the kid who gets it? Do they think something's wrong? No, they're excited. Yo, I got the keys to Joe's car. Joe's car, you're kidding me. He's got a car. Yeah, you know, they're all pumped about it. Well, Joe's not thinking straight if he's giving away his car. Okay? Or for the girls, they'll give away their favorite jewelry or something from their grandmother. Literally, we worked with a youth group up in Tacoma where they had a young man. He made an attempt on his life. He was still going to live. So they went to the house to see if there was a suicide note. They walk into the house, and there is nothing left in his room except the furniture. He'd given every bit of his clothing, his music, everything he had was gone. And part of the problem was his parents didn't even see it. I mean, how do you know you'd have to carry out a lot of boxes of stuff? They never even saw it. So again, part of the big problem. So anyway, cleaning house. If there's a divorce with the parents, okay, even though it's common, it's still tragic. Okay, so how many of you have lived through where your folks got a divorce? Yeah. I always call it the gift that keeps on giving, because nothing, it's never solved. Our kids grew up having to have 3 Christmases because my mom and my dad couldn't be in the same room at the same time. Okay, so not only is that a challenge, but how many of you know, like we already mentioned, the students almost always think they're at least partly to fault, if not totally at fault. So if there's a divorce with the parents, but the one thing about the divorce with the parents, remember, dating is like marriage minus the ring. So when you break up, it's divorce minus the paperwork. It's huge. You start reading articles about kids that have made an attempt on their lives and then live about it so they can talk about it. Oftentimes, the last straw for them was a breakup, just like the girl we talked about there. You know, there's that relationship explosion that just blows them all over the planet. So if there's a divorce, if they start to show symptoms of not caring, and that usually shows up in physical appearance. How many of you know, either because you've got them yourself or you know students, how many of you know students that take 2 or 3 showers a day? Yeah, not uncommon at all. Okay, not uncommon. Well, take that same kid, and let's say they go 2 or 3 days without a shower. Okay, they don't care. They gave up. You know, they quit taking care of themselves. They quit getting presentable. They quit. It's I don't care. They wear the same clothes 2 or 3 days in a row. Maybe they never even get out of them. Okay, those are all warning signs. If they all of a sudden become sexually active, okay? How many of you know being in youth ministry means you talk about awkward things? You better, because you have to. Because if you don't talk about them, they're talking about them. If you don't give them boundaries, they're creating their own, and they're usually not healthy, okay? So this one girl that we talked about at first, she got to the point where literally it was any guy. And by this time, I've been working with her enough, I could say anything. I said, okay, so how come you went from like one guy forever to any guy? And she said, exactly. For 15 minutes, I can pretend that I'm loved. How many of you know that's pure desperation? That's all it is. You know, so all of a sudden there's an uptake in that. And here's where their friends won't meet it, won't see it. Because some of their friends are like going, oh man, I wish I was her. Oh man, I wish I was him. They have no perspective of what's really going on. So become sex active. If they get involved in the drug and alcohol world, okay, and then in a minute I'll show you why that's such a big deal. 80% of all suicide attempts happen under the influence of drugs or alcohol. 80% of all first crime committed happens under the influence of drugs or alcohol. 80% of all unwanted sexual contact happens under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Okay? I mean, that's just a practical reality. And yet, how many of you know our culture is, Steve talked about the 1700s. How many of you know our culture right now is leaning farther and farther into the drug and alcohol world all the time? Because everything's legal now. There's no taboos. I couldn't even tell you how many different types of beer, you know, spirited liquors are available to everybody, anywhere, all the time. I mean, they wouldn't be selling this stuff if people didn't feel like they needed to drink it. But they're not coping with the real world. This is their one way to unwind, their one way to relax. I mean, it's become a cultural garu type thing. You know, so again, that sets us up for all kinds of problems. If all of a sudden there's death talk, and death talk can be interesting, they'll start having conversations like this. So, like, what do you think it'd be like to die fast? What do you think it'd be like to die slow? So, if somebody like was going to take their own life, could they still go to heaven? How many of you that's not normal conversation stuff? But it's death talk. They're trying to figure out something about this whole death thing. Okay, and then it'll actually roll over into death art. All of a sudden, all their doodles are dark. You know, that can be a part. In Scripture, it says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Well, how many of you know out of the abundance of the heart, the hand writes? Yeah, so art, little scribbles, little notes, poetry, whatever, all that kind of starts coming out. And then they start coming up with plans. But they won't say it necessarily like this. Hey, you know what? Friday I'm going to kill myself. Here's how I'm going to do it. But they'll say stuff like this. You know, I know where my dad keeps his gun, and I know how to get the ammo. Or let's say, you know what? There's that one bridge that goes over the freeway. Man, there's no way you could live if you jumped off that. Or you know, if you were drunk enough, I'll bet you wouldn't even feel it if a train hit you. Those are plans, distinct plans. Okay, and we got to pay attention to that kind of stuff. And then if they roll over into the whole isolation thing, because here's the challenge with people that are suicidal. They need help more than anybody, but they don't ask for it. And how many of you know that the roaring lion who seeks to devour has a strategy? Now, anybody here been to Africa before and seen lions hunt? My wife has. Anybody else? Okay, here's the deal. Think about it. You're all antelopes. You're by the watering hole. I'm a lion. And I'm going, roar, roar. Well, one, you know where I am. Two, you know that if in numbers there's safety, because I'm not going to attack all you. But let's say one of you is a little bit weak, one of you is a little bit disoriented, and I start going, roar, roar, and all of a sudden you go, panic and you run. Now you're in trouble, not from me, but from the mama lion who's just around the corner. See, it's that panic that produces the problem. And so as soon as you get singled out, how many of you know that's when the lion gets dinner? Yeah. When you're singled out. When you're in numbers and you're in community and you're in the safety of that, you got nothing to worry about. But when you get singled out and you're weak and you're hurting and you can't outrun the other lion, that's when the lions get dinner. And see, that's what the roaring lion does, is they scare you into where you really shouldn't go. The lion never stops making noise. How many of you know the devil always has a voice somewhere? Always. That's just the way it is. But that's not the problem. It's what we do when we hear it. And how many of you know right now our culture is a more fearful culture than it's ever been, at least in my lifetime. Okay, 9/11 opened the doors of fear. And how many of you know the second largest holiday in our country right now is Halloween? Easter has lost second place. Now it's Christmas. Now it's Halloween. And what is the whole point of Halloween? Fear. How close can I get? How much energy can I get? How much pumped up can I get from being afraid? And again, it was mentioned before already today. So those are like the warning signs, and here's where they get like really scary. So do you wear contacts? Perfect vision. Pretty close? Come on up.
That's what you get for saying that.
Well, but she doesn't wear glasses either. So it's always fun when I'm doing this in the public schools. Guys say, okay, I need a volunteer for my next thing, but there's qualifications. So finally get my person. I said, okay, so go ahead and look at it, everybody. One good last look at them. Because at the count of 3, I'm going to make them disappear.
Oh gosh.
I'm really good at this. I've been doing it all over the world. Ready?
Okay.
Okay. 1, 2, put these on.
Okay.
3. What just happened?
Everything became really blurry.
Yes, it did. It's just a blob out there, aren't they? Okay, so you volunteered. Okay, so you got to leave them on. So especially the back row right now, if you hadn't seen them before glasses, could you even tell if they were guys or gals for sure?
No.
No, pretty iffy. Okay, so let's just say they were kind of upset that you couldn't even tell if they were a guy or a gal. Let's say they had a 6-inch knife. Could you see it?
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay, so now let's make it scarier. This is about 6 inches long. Let's say they start coming towards us. Okay, you tell me when this is clear.
Right there.
Boom. Okay, here we go. You ready? Okay, when somebody is drunk or high, do their problems disappear?
No.
No. But they can't see them till they get how close? Right there.
Wow.
And they panic and they do things they would never do sober. Okay, that one girl I talked about, she never once made an attempt on her life when she was completely sober. She made multiple attempts because of this. And that's the challenge with the whole drug and alcohol world, is that you take a student, put them in that world, and in our culture it's like, hey, had a bad week, let's go get ripped and forget about it. Unfortunately, the problems don't disappear, they just reappear right here, and they panic and do stuff they would never do. So keeping a kid sober is huge. Now, I would love to put up a billboard in my area that said, stay sober. But how many of you know it would do like 0 good? But here's the deal with your students. Do they have influence with their friends? Yeah, they do. They're the ones that can keep their friends from going down this road. Okay, now here's the other scary thing. How old are you right now?
18.
Okay, 18. In 10 years you will be?
28.
28, good. That's why you went to school. Okay, so you'll be 28. But here's the deal. When somebody gets into the drug and alcohol world, let's say you had to wear those for a week.
Oh.
Yeah, good week, bad week.
Bad week.
Bad week, okay. So do you think, are you still in school, out of school?
I'm out of school.
But job?
I have a job.
Okay, how well do you think you do with a job with those?
Not good.
Not good,
Not
okay,
good at
okay.
all.
Okay, how about like relationships? Could you tell if somebody was mad or sad or whatever in your world?
No.
No. See, what happens is if you get in the drug and alcohol world, you stop maturing. So even though 10 years from now she'd be 28, she'd really only be 18 if she was in the drug and alcohol world. So then she shows up for a job interview, she fills out the app, they see 28, she shows up and she gives them 18. So how long does she work? Day or two maybe? Okay? There's some guy says, hey, she's really cute. He starts talking to her, he's thinking 28, but everything she says is 18. He goes to the bathroom. Does he come back? No. See what I mean? So that whole idea of sobriety, all those things I mentioned about first crime, unwanted sexual contact, all that stuff, that starts here. And so that's not necessarily a theme of the church to a degree, but we got to warn these students about this stuff. We got to help them get their boundaries in that world, because I'll tell you what, there is so much stuff that is so easily available to them, it's hard not to go down this road if they hang out with their friends. Okay? So you ready to come back to the scene world?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. 'Cause like,
My
yeah.
eyes.
Yeah, you know, way you saw with him is the way I see without him. Yeah. So
Mind his glasses. If he drops his glasses, he cannot see them.
I can't find him.
He goes, the glasses fell off the nightstand. Can you find them?
So literally, I can't see him. So thank you very much. You did a good job. Okay, so for us, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, she was a brave volunteer. I stab people in one of my talks. That's harder to get volunteers after that. But so the whole sorrow, the sobriety thing is huge. Number 2 is sorrow. Okay, one of the realities about any emotion that we don't deal with, if you don't process something, it festers. So even like right now, how many of you, if somebody went through your refrigerator, they might find something in a Tupperware dish or container that might be a little scary? Anybody have some of that stuff? Yeah. A couple times I've come home, my wife's come home where she was gone, and she, oh, what'd you have for dinner? And I'll tell her, she goes, oh no. I meant to throw that away that like 3 days ago. And I'm like, well, I'm still okay. So she's apologizing right now. Okay, so, that's the real world, right? Sorrow is exactly the same way. If we don't process it, it builds up, just like any other emotion. And unfortunately, our culture doesn't process sorrow. We sweep it under the covers. We say, hey, move on, get on with your life, and all that kind of stuff. That's not how it works. I mean, Jesus even said in Matthew 5, blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. Do we have any place for mourning in our culture? No. I've been all over the world. I've been in countries where they have place for mourning. Not only do they actively, outwardly mourn, they carry the coffin through the community so the whole town mourns the loss of somebody. Everybody's aware of it. Everybody cries together. Everybody knows their loss. They process it. So it doesn't become this chain around their neck. Not in our culture. We just blow by it. Okay? But it doesn't go away. If you have a couple who have dated for a while and they break up, guess what they will experience? Let's say they've been together for a year. Guess what they're going to experience for the whole next year? Yeah, sorrow. Of the first rose, the first date, the first movie. I mean, everything. For a year, they're going to go through that. That's sorrow. So if we don't teach our kids how to process it, we don't give them opportunities to work through stuff and recognize that's real, it's going to build up. Okay? Seriously, if a kid says anything that hints of suicide, you gotta take them seriously. Because we already know it's not easy to talk about. So just the fact that they brought up something that kind of sounds like they're going down that road, boy, take them aside and talk to them. Sit them down. And if need be, get them help. Okay, because that's what the safety net is all about. You've got to create ways, because here's the reality about a kid who's suicidal. Sooner or later, you got to sleep. Sooner or later, your phone's not going to be charged. Sooner or later, and if you're the only one keeping a kid alive, that's not enough. Not only is it incredibly challenging for you to just stay sane, but it's impossible to have it work out. I did one of my school talks at a middle school where I'll be on Monday, and a 7th grade girl comes up and she says, what do I do? She says, I met this guy online, he's suicidal, I'm the only person keeping him alive. The girl is 12. What kind of pressure is that? It's killing her. Fortunately, and this guy was actually in Colorado. Okay, so it's just nuts, right? But she had enough contact information where we were able to get a safety net set up for that guy. Okay, so, we were able to make it work. But here's the thing about a safety net, and this is why I always preface things when I'm talking with students. I always tell them, I said, hey, if you've got something to say to me, I cannot make the promise that I won't tell somebody. Because how many of you know students almost always preface that, they go, hey, I've got something to tell you, but promise not to tell anybody. And I say right off the bat, I can't make that promise. If I need to get somebody in your world to help you, I'm going to do that. And they're like, okay. And I've never had a kid not talk to me, ever. Because here's the deal. You can't do it by yourself, okay? So think that through. Who could be in a safety net? The bigger the better. Who could be in a safety net? Parents. Yeah, parents. Because a lot of times the parents are clueless. Okay? In the situation of the one girl I talked about, turned out mom was still suicidal. Mom actually kept liquor and pills in the house so she could make an attempt if she wanted to. So what did that mean was available to the girl? Same liquor and pills. Okay, yeah, so we got a BOGO deal on that one, 2 for 1. Okay, so yeah, parents. Who else could be in a safety net? Yeah, pastor. Not just you, the lead pastor. They got to know. Okay, they got to know, because here's the deal about when you walk into a suicidal situation, it's usually not a one and done. It's going to drag on for a long time, and it's going to be labor intensive. Okay, this is going to suck your time, because that's just what it takes. Okay, so lead pastor needs to know. Who else should know?
Extended family.
What's that? Yeah, extended family if they've got some. Yeah, because how many of some kids are a lot closer to their grandparents than they are their parents? Yeah, sometimes you got to rely on that. Okay, how many of you are actually connected with your public schools? Yeah, you got to be connected. you got to know the counselors. They got to know you. Fortunately for her, by this time I was well connected, so I could call the school that she went to and I said, hey, she had a bad weekend. Hey, she already signed up for counseling because it was a Monday. And they go, yeah, actually she is. I go, great. So then they would kind of carry the ball during the school days. Sometimes they called me and they said, you know what? We think she's got some pills, but she won't talk to us. Can you please come talk to her? Forget separation of church and state, okay? They're not the enemy. We don't battle against flesh and blood. We battle against principalities, okay? Think that through for life, okay? So when it comes to the schools, you got to be connected with these guys. Okay, so again, they were part of it. For her, we ended up with a professional counselor. There were about 4 or 5 different key people that helped keep her alive. Okay, and don't be afraid to call 911. Okay, for her, I had to call it twice for her to keep her alive. Had another guy who called one time from a motel room who'd already slit his wrist, just calling to say goodbye. Obviously, I couldn't get there. It was the next town over, but the police got there in time. Okay, don't be afraid to call 911. They are trained first responders. Okay, and what's nice about their trained first response is they get them into a system that it can actually help. Okay, you can't do that. You can't create that. So again, that safety net is huge. Now, how many of you guys have already learned something today? Okay, good. Here's the deal. Your students need to know this too. Okay, they need to know this stuff because none of this is complicated. Didn't use any big words, didn't throw out scientific terminology, no psychobabble. This is just regular life stuff. And really that's what keeps all of us alive is the regular life stuff. Is, you know, just the day by day, the grind. So if you can equip your students, because here's the cool thing about a Christian kid. As stumbly and bumbly as they are, they're still light and salt in their campus. Okay, they are still the sight and the, they're the thing that keeps our campus going. Even though they're nowhere near perfect, just like us, okay? But if you can equip them, not only does that give them a chance to help their friends, but especially in the youth group community, now you have a common language. You know, so a friend can say to a friend, where are you at on this? And they go, man, I remember them talking about that a few weeks ago. I'm right here. And then they can be a part of the process of getting that kid help. So it's huge help to be able to have a common language, know how to be able to talk to it and about it, and not flinch. Because how many of you know in youth ministry, you kind of have to be bulletproof? Because how many of you have already heard a few things from students that you never heard growing up? Yeah, how many of you know they almost test you with? Yeah, I've heard some stuff. I remember one of the things I heard, which I'm not going to repeat because it's being recorded, but I remember one of the things I heard where it was everything within me not to respond. And I just kind of had to go, oh, really? You know, that was not what I was thinking, okay? You know, my whole heart's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's like 300 beats and, oh, really? You know, and just kind of go with it. But the reality is that's the world we live in. So having a way to talk about it is huge. Now, anybody got any questions? Go for it.
At what point do you go to somebody else?
Okay, at what point do you go to somebody else? Pretty quickly. If it's real, okay, you go pretty quickly. Because again, it's that safety net reality. If you don't have a safety net set up, and all of a sudden there's an attempt, and you're the only one that can do anything about it, then you're not giving them a safety net. You're throwing out a line and hoping they can catch it. And that's just not good enough. Now, one more thing too. How many of you have already had a suicide in your community where you've been kind of called on to deal with it? Kind of after the fact. Okay, I've been in churches after the fact, communities after the fact. If I'm in a church setting, the scripture I use to talk to people about it is Matthew chapter 14. And that's where Peter gets out of the boat, starts to walk on the water. And he gets towards Jesus. And if you think about it, that's pretty amazing. He's walking on the water. But the Bible says that he sees the winds and the waves, and he begins to sink. And he cries out, Lord, save me. And then here's the key. The scripture says, and Jesus reached out his hand and grabbed him. So how far away was Jesus? Right there. Because one of the things, the question that always gets asked in the church setting, well, where was God when this was going on? And the answer is, he was right there. But how many of you know we're really good at seeing the wind and the waves instead of him? Yeah, so in a spiritual setting, sometimes you just kind of have to throw that out there. And then the next question is, well, are they going to go to heaven or hell? I say, well, you know what? Do we ever make that call? No, we don't know. Because what happened in that time between consciousness and death and all that kind of stuff, I'll tell you what, I've known people that have been in comas and that come out of it, and they had spiritual experiences in their comas. There was no outward sign that that was going on. So the Matthew 14 is what we use. In a secular setting, we just talk about, again, the challenges. You know, how many of us know all of us need to be better at helping each other? How many of us know all of us need to be better at knowing what's going on in the other person's world so we can work this thing together? That whole we're better together thing, it's kind of a bummer that that slogan isn't the church's slogan. It's actually real and legit. Okay? So, good question. Any other questions? Go for it.
So you talked about coming alongside of them and
Right.
talking with them, and even using this as an example, but what about the person who doesn't want to talk, that doesn't want to say why they're struggling, how
Correct.
they're struggling?
Correct.
You know they're struggling,
Correct.
but they won't open up about it.
Initially. Okay, they won't initially open up. Because here's the thing I've learned about students. How many of you know the word trust is big with them? And they've been burned. So I always think of trust this way. Trust stands for T, stands for time. R, being reliable. And reliable doesn't mean perfect. Reliable just means they can count on you being you. So trust, reliable. U is understanding. Because a lot of times people won't talk to you if they don't think you can understand. Because I remember we had a gal in our church that was going through all kinds of stuff. And she actually talked to my wife first, and she said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something, but I don't think you'd understand. And my wife goes, what do you mean? Well, wasn't your dad a pastor? No. I didn't get saved till I was in my late teens. Oh. But your husband, he's a preacher. You play the piano. You know? She goes, yeah. Nothing to do with me being perfect as a kid growing up. Well, what about your husband? Wasn't his dad like a missionary or something? No. He didn't get saved till he was 22. Never went to church before that. And she's like, oh. When she finally realized that we just might understand, then she talked to us. So that's a lot of it with students. I have learned, because I'm working with new groups all the time, whether it's a winter camp or a mission trip or a public schools, I ask them questions, and I listen. I just ask questions. What do you like about school? You don't like school? Has it always been that way? Oh, really? 6th grade. What happened in 6th grade? Oh, my parents got a divorce. Okay. So that's where you build that bridge of trust. So trust, reliable, understand, T-R-U-S-T, success. When you start talking to them about how Jesus is going to solve all their problems, because how many of you know we do say that, and it's true, once they lock in with him, okay, but they got to feel some success in that. I remember I had a gal that would call me. She had horrible, home situation, really bad. And she would call me crying, oh, Pastor Mark, whoa. And so we'd pray, and then she'd kind of calm down. 2 days later, whoa, and then we'd pray, she'd calm down. 1 week she didn't call me. And now I'm really worried. I'm thinking, okay, she ran away from home. She killed her parents or in a meat locker. I went down all those roads, right? So she shows up at church on Sunday, and I go, hey, Jesse, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. No, Jesse, talk to me. How you doing? Oh, I'm good. No, Jesse, what's going on? What do you mean, Pastor Mark? You're being really weird. And I'm like, well, you didn't call me this week. She goes, well, duh, I don't need you to pray. You're right. You don't need me to pray. But she had called, and she had connected finally. When we prayed, she calmed down. When we prayed, she could deal with it. So eventually she learned to pray on her own. And that's one of the things about, the walk with Jesus thing. We live in a natural world, but he calls us to live in a supernatural world, a spiritual world. There's a learning curve to that. So if we can help students find some success for themselves, their own prayer stories, their own scripture meant something to me stories, that success, then the last T stands for tested. Okay, I've had 2 death threats in my life, and both came from kids in my youth group. Because how many of you know hurt kids want to hurt people? Yeah, so out of the anger and angst of their hearts. So you're going to get tested. And I wish trust could happen like this, but you tend to got to earn it. So that's where a kid will talk to you eventually. Or if other students trust you, they'll tell them, no, dude, you can trust him. You can talk to her. So that's a lot of it is make it available. You can't sit on them and beat them until they talk to you. You can do that with your own kids, but you can't do that with your youth group kids. Okay, you know what I mean? So make it available. Just let them know, hey, door's open. And again, but if you've trained the other teenagers, a lot of times they'll talk to them. Okay, good question. Anybody else? Yes, go for it. Right. Yes.
couples.
And they are junior hires who don't need permission slips. It's the only difference, okay?
But how will the safety net will look for them though?
Real similar.
Okay.
Yeah, real similar. Because they either have jobs
Mm-hmm.
or they're in school. And all school campuses have some kind of school counseling.
Okay.
Almost every job has some kind of human resource type person or whatever. So that would be a part of the same safety net. And like with young adults, because I work with them too, you know, kind of in the general youth
You
world.
recommend them like if there's something going on for us to call their job and
Yeah. Say, hey, how's Joe doing at work? Well, he's been a little off this week. Okay, well, here's why. He's really concerned about losing his job or his family or, you know, whatever. Yeah, as many people as you can. Because that's the one thing when somebody confides in you, I always preface it with a, you know, hey, you promise not to tell. Or say, no, I can't make that promise. You know, if I need to get people in your world to help you with this, I'm going to do that. See, and then don't be afraid to do it.
Yeah, because it's like since they're adults, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I mean,
Living their life.
exactly, a meddling.
Oh, sorry.
Guess what? They need to be meddled with. Because again, that's that lion trying to separate us and the reality of God calling us back into community. You know, because that is one of the challenges. And young adults, they're probably more challenging to a certain degree than middle school just because they can make really big mistakes. You know, junior hires can get in plenty of trouble, but when you're 20, you can really, the price of life and mistakes just goes up. So, but yeah, safety net is still huge. The one positive about the young adult world is more of the dots have connected for them. Not all, but more. Okay, because like I remember one of the guys that was a young adult who tried to take his life, his issues were financial. Okay, he'd gotten so far behind, he charged so much on credit cards, and it was partly the way he was raised. So he had no idea of how to deal with his own money. And so he had a decent job, but his credit card payments were more than his, you know, monthly salary. But we were able to, you know, consolidate debt, blah, 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 got him out of that, teach him some new ways to deal with finances, and then we never had an issue after that. But again, you had to go to that problem. What was the obstacle? What was the challenge he can't get past? Well, for him, it was a combination of really bad upbringing and how his folks did financing, and then how he followed through on that. And now he had a very, you know, significant financial debt. You know, so again, it's being able to identify those issues and kind of work backwards on it now. So, but yeah, young adults. And here's the next season in life where it becomes really high is the old people. Okay, that's the next season in life because they're facing. Yeah, well, I am that guy, okay? I'm 67. So people around me are dying and retiring and all kinds of stuff, you know. So for a lot of people, it's that same stuff. It's those challenges, you know, and they just don't know how to face it and they just give up and check out. Whereas again, in Christ, there's always answers. There's always answers.
Sorry, I have a second question.
No, go for it.
How do you treat the person who I don't know, like you said at the beginning, you know, like they call that person and the person answer in the wrong way, you know, and that caused the other person, you know, to commit suicide. How do you talk to them? How do you treat them? Because I know the devil brings guilt, you know, and
Yeah, all of the above.
we're trying to avoid, you know, them going to the same
Yep.
route. So how do you treat them?
This is where being real is huge. If they've ever seen you make a mistake and then you cleaned up your mess, that will help them clean up their mess. Okay? I don't know about you, but as a youth pastor, I apologize to my youth group more than once for either, you know, getting upset at something I shouldn't have had or just a snide comment back to a kid or whatever. More than once, I cleaned up my mess with a student. My wife can tell you, we don't go past meal times without cleaning up messes. So when we pray at a meal, it's not just popcorn prayer, it's real prayer. So we're really good at cleaning up our messes. And especially in the young adult world, I mean, I work with all age students and I try to tell them to clean up their messes, but especially young adults, man, if you don't clean up one of your messes you made, that's really going to impact your life. You know, you kind of get a fresh start at high school when it's over and stuff. You don't get a fresh start when you're a young adult. You got to clean up your messes. So, you know, being able to deal with that is huge. Yeah. Good question, though. Go for it.
So I have a suggestion on the warning signs.
Yes.
I personally experienced suicide. My best friend committed suicide when I was in 8th grade. And one of the things I noticed that he would do all the time that stood out to me was gestures. He hung himself and he would make gestures like he was choking himself.
Yeah.
So I think that's another really big important thing to look for, is if you notice kids making any kind of gestures like a weapon, or they're pretending to choke themselves, that's a huge sign to me, because
Yeah.
I totally missed it, and that's how he committed suicide.
Yeah.
Himself.
Yeah, and that would be, again, that's part of that communication that they're making, nonverbal. But yeah, and that would be definitely, and that's the challenge with the warning signs. There's probably at least 50 of them. You know, these are kind of like the common ones. I've seen all these. I haven't so much seen where they act like they're going to, but they draw it. I saw a lot of duels and a lot of really dark poetry. That was the other thing as I started. Because here's the weird thing about students that want help but refuse help but still ask for it, kind of like under the table. Because I would clean up, say, a youth room after a youth group meeting, and here would be a poem left on a chair. And it would be a dark, dark poem. And it was basically why I need to kill myself, why I'm not, worth being here, and all that kind of stuff. And of course, the kid didn't necessarily think you knew who it was, but they hoped you knew who it was.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
When you're at that age and you have a friend or a close friend that ends up committing suicide,
Right.
and you're a friend that walks in the faith and tells that other friend about God, and he starts asking questions.
Right.
Like, what's the best way to address kids at that age that have experienced what happened to myself at 14?
Right. They've been through the dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
I love John chapter 10 because it says we have a thief who comes to kill, steal, and destroy. We don't want to acknowledge him. It's kind of interesting culturally, say 50 years ago, every cartoon, when somebody was trying to decide what to do, the right thing or the wrong thing, they always had a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. And they were on cartoons, so people kind of laughed at it. But how many of you know that's 100% true? See, our culture today won't put the devil on the shoulder. They won't put the angel on the shoulder. But that's still what's going on. So that's where I always try to introduce to people, because I say, well, if a God was God of love, how come all this stuff happens? I said, well, there's an enemy out there. Comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And if he can take one person out, that's a victory for him. So to give them a big picture reality always helps. It's like when you're going to do a puzzle, what do you do first? The boundaries. Okay, and unfortunately our culture is really messing with the boundaries. I remember in a psych ward one time I went in to visit a gal who I didn't know. Somebody just kind of asked me to visit. And that's probably one of the most awkward things you can do. Walk up to somebody who's in a psych ward who you don't know, they don't know you. They didn't ask you to come, but you're there anyway. So I check in and talk to the gal. I say, okay, where? She's over there. I said, okay, what's her name? Donna. Okay, so I go over and say, hi, Donna. You've got a frame name, so-and-so, and they asked me to come visit you. And she just looked up and went, pfft, and went back to what she was doing. She's doing a puzzle. So I don't give up easy. So I just sat down, started doing the boundary with her. So we do the boundary, and once we get it all done, it looks like the state of New York. Anybody know what New York looks like? It's not a square state like Nebraska or anything like that. It's big on this end, narrows down, squares out like that. This is what the boundary looks like. And so we're looking at the cover of the puzzle box, we're looking at that, and simultaneously we realize several things. One, the puzzles we're working on are not the puzzles that are on the cover of the box. Two, we're in a psych ward. This puzzle is supposed to be therapeutic. It is the exact opposite of therapeutic. The two of us we howled so long, so loud, we're both just crying tears. Okay? She accepted Christ probably about 2 weeks later. We had work parties at our house every month for years. She was part of our work party till the day she died. Okay? But we had to wade into that world. We had to walk into it. We had to get the right boundaries for her so that life made sense. And that's where a lot of students are at. They're trying to piece together life and how it works. Well, Scripture's a light to our feet and a lamp to our path, and that gives us the big boundaries and the little details. But that's the challenge that we face a lot with students, is they don't have any boundaries. It's kind of the whatever you want to dream you can achieve, and yada, yada, yada. If it feels good, do it. And on and on and on we go, and none of that works. So we got to give them boundaries and all that kind of good stuff. Because here's the cool thing about boundaries. Anybody ever driven on the Autobahn before? Okay, don't know what you're missing, folks. Okay, I have driven 145 miles an hour on the Autobahn and been passed by cars doing 200 miles an hour. And this is a public road. This is not NASCAR. And it's safer than our highways. Because the roads are so well built, okay, and you can't get a driver's license till you're 18, and the driver's ed they go through is equivalent to what the Washington State Patrol guys go through when they're learning how to do high-speed chases and all that kind of stuff. They actually teach people how to drive there, okay, and their standards are so strict that if you don't pass the driver's test, you have to take the course over again, and it costs about $3,000, okay? But that's what life could be with boundaries. We got to be good at giving them. We've already got them. We just got to be good at making them understandable and why it is what it is. So, yeah. So hopefully that helps. Good. Good questions. Anybody else? Cool. Well, my contact information is not on here. Okay. So it doesn't mean I'm being secretive. It just means I do this in the public schools. So that's a different animal. So we've got a table. When you first go out there, just past the girls' room, left-hand side.
A whole bunch of books on it.
Whole bunch of books.
Feel free to pick up one of the business cards.
Yeah, business cards that got all the contact information. And we've got 3 different YouTube videos that have all this stuff on it.
Yeah, if you go to our website, you can go to downloads and you can
Find the links.
Yeah, and the YouTube videos are a little bit dated right now. We're just in the process of getting
Finishing,
them in.
we've shot all the video on them, and we're, like Tuesday, I'm going to meet with my mixer guy, and we're going to
But yeah, we've got
hopefully finish them out.
Hopeless curriculum you can download from the website. It's
For
also
free.
on the table if you want to just look at it. It uses the videos, but it goes through crisis issues.
Yeah, pretty much everything. Because we do it where we spend 4 weeks on wounds, 4 weeks on anger, and then 4 weeks on suicide
And if you
itself.
have
So
a school that wants us to, that you can get Mark into, he will come in and speak to your school.
free.
Free. Just get him in and he will come in and talk to the classroom.
Yeah, but even more importantly, you guys get good enough at it to where you could do it. I got limited shelf life, okay? So you guys will be around here longer than I am. Cool, thank you.